Okay, today we're going to talk about the Protestant Reformation. Here are some causes: the 100 Years' War and the Black Death, scientific advances which contradict the church, and of course corruption within the church. Anytime you have a big organization, there's probably going to be some corruption, and this is no different for the Catholic Church. So, what was the Protestant Reformation? Prior to the Reformation, all Christians in Western Europe were known as Roman Catholics. After the Reformation, after the Protestant Reformation, you're going to have Protestants, you're going to have Catholics, and then you're going to have different denominations. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The Reformation was an attempt to reform the Catholic Church, really from within. So like monks and things. People like Martin Luther wanted to get rid of the corruption and restore people's faith in the church. So, what was the Protestant Reformation? In the end, reformers like Luther are going to end up being forced to establish or just establishing their own new religions. The Reformation causes a split within the Christian church in Western Europe, and you're going to get these new Protestant religions out of it. So, if you look here, this basically it tells you, of course, Christianity, and you have the Catholic Church, and after 1517 you're going to have the Protestant Church. You're going to have Protestants. So reformers, mainly the ones we're going to talk about are the Martin Luther and John Calvin. We're not really going to talk about Henry VIII. We've already talked about him. Martin Luther is a monk. He lived in Germany from 1483 to 1546, and his father wants him to get into law, but he has a sudden religious experience that inspired him to become a monk. So Martin Luther, he became troubled at the possibility of not going to heaven, so he turns to the Bible for confession and for comfort. And in the Bible, he found exactly what he's looking for, and it's Romans 1:17, and it says, the righteous shall be his faith. And basically what this says is that it's good to be good, it's good to do good deeds, but that's not going to get you into heaven. The rituals are not going to get you there. It is your faith alone that's going to get you to heaven. So, with this, Martin Luther looks at all the things going on in the Catholic Church and he says, man, there's a lot of corruptions going on here that we're just not practicing the word the way we need to. So he comes up with this complaint sheet, and it's called the 95 Thesis. Basically, it's 95 complaints, and he criticizes the church on 95 counts for being corrupt. Power of the Pope, the church's extreme wealth, but this third one here, indulgences, you need to kind of know this one. This is a major term, and it's a concept of salvation. And what happens is if you sin on earth, if you pay the Catholic Church enough money, then they will forgive you of your sin, and they will have they'll have a conversation. The Pope will have a conversation with God. God will forgive you, and you're able to move on. This is not acceptable to Martin Luther. This is a major corruption in his mind. So, moving on, Martin posts his 95 Thesis. Of course, Gutenberg's printing press, invented in the 1400s, 1450, makes it extremely quick to get the information out of what he's complaining against, this 95 Thesis. So a lot of people get to read it in Europe. He posts his 95 Thesis on the church doors in Germany. He does this on October 31st, 1517. So he does it on what is Halloween, and Halloween has its own interesting history about it as well. Keep in mind, the church has its view of Halloween, and of course the Celts have theirs. So, and then of course the modern day. So the first thing printed on Gutenberg's printing press was the Bible. Here's a picture of it. So acceptance of the reforms. Some local German churches accept Luther's ideas, some don't. is supported by German princes who issued formal protests against the church for suppressing the reforms, and the reformers became known as Protestants. So, meanwhile, you have John Calvin, you have Calvinism in Switzerland. It starts in Switzerland. In England, they're called Puritans. In Scotland, they're called Presbyterians. In Holland, they're called the Dutch Reform. In France, they're called Huguenots, and Huguenots French for Protestant. And Germany, they're called the Reformed Church. So, what you start to see here in Western Europe is you start to see Catholics divided off into Catholics and then Protestants, and then with the Protestant faith, you start to see Lutheranism, Calvinism, Puritans, Presbyterians, and Huguenots. John Calvin, he's the inventor of Calvinism. He is a French lawyer. He moves to a religious community in Geneva, Switzerland, where it's basically they teach faith alone saves you. The Bible holds the truth, and he, teaches religious education, or is founded on religious education. The big thing to get out of Calvinism is predestination, and that is God has already decided who's going to be saved and condemned because God's all-knowing, he's omnipotent, he's everywhere, and so he's already seen the end. This is going to become big when we talk about kings, the divine right of kings, and absolutism moving down the road. So Calvinism spreads throughout Western Europe. Here's some places, as you can see, it spreads throughout Western Europe. We're not going to really talk about Henry VIII. We've already talked about him. So after the Protestant Reformation starts in 1517, the Catholic Church, they start to look at Martin Luther and say, man, that dude's nutty. But then they start thinking, wait a minute, maybe he's got a point. He was a monk. He was devout to the Catholic Church, so maybe he's not a nut. So they start to say, well, maybe we need to kind of look at things internally and see if we are doing things right. This is called the Counter-Reformation. This is called the Catholic Reformation. At any rate, the church is going to strike back. So by 1545, because this council is going to meet for 17 years on and off, by 1545, you have this declaration, the Council of Trent, come out, and they determined what was heresy or teachings against the church. It took them 17 years to kind of delve into this and kind of, it wasn't all at one time either. I mean, it took them 17 years, so it wasn't 17 years of reform. But they determined what was heresy or teachings against the church. They reaffirmed what was church teachings. So they go back and reform it and say this is a church doctrine, this is not. And then they launch the Inquisition. And the Inquisition is going to be notorious. It's actually John Paul II, before he died in the early 2000s, issued a formal apology from the Catholic Church for the horrors and what happened with the Inquisition. This is where you're going to get the burning at the stakes and stuff like that. And trial by... trial by fire kind of thing. The Catholic Church also launches the Jesuit faith out of the Council of Trent. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Spanish Inquisition, but in short, now I'm not going to talk about it today, but we'll talk about it at a different time. But it was very brutal, led by King Ferdinand and Isabella. In short, the Reformation ended church unity in Western Europe. Instead of having everybody all Roman Catholics, now look at all the different religions, look at all the different sects or denominations springing up in Western Europe. Okay, you got, as you see here, you have Lutheranism, you have Reform, Calvinism, you have Anglicans, you have Catholic Church. Remember, you got Orthodox and Islam as well. Okay, so there's all kinds of different denominations of the Christian faith now. And here you go in 1650. We are finished for the day.